Just about there. You're all set.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the November 18th, 2021 meeting of the ERCA Board of Directors. I am calling the meeting to order, and just to confirm that all members attending from the in-camera sessions preceding this meeting are still with us. And thank you. Yes, now we are all present. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that this land is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and all the original peoples of Turtle Island, North America, who've been living and working on the land from time immemorial. Please raise your hand to indicate if there are any members who may need to declare a conflict of interest. I am seeing none. We can now proceed with this evening agenda for the board.
Hello.
Yes, good evening. Hi, how are you? Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to guess, are you one of the applicants for the ingress egress?
No, it's Marilyn Morrison.
Oh, hey, Marilyn, welcome.
I was trying to get in earlier, but it put me on kind of a hold pattern. So.
Okay, we now have a name to your phone. Okay. Welcome. And we just began, so welcome to the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So if we want to, I need a mover to approve tonight's November 18th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Directors. Moved by Morley Bowman, seconded by Peter Courtney. Anybody opposed? That is carried. So now we do have to convene as the hearing board. Board of Directors sit as the hearing board in respect of applicants under Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act. Moved by Sue Desjardins, seconded by Deputy Mayor Tracy Bailey. Anybody opposed? That is carried. We are now going to conduct hearings under Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act in respect of two applications. Marlene Chapman is requesting relief from ingress egress policy requirements to construct an addition to the existing dwelling at 8830 Riverside Drive in the city of Windsor. Russell Urbanowski is requesting relief from access ingress egress policy requirements to construct additions and undertake renovations to an existing dwelling at 166 Cove Drive in the town of Tecumseh. We, as the hearing board, are unaware of the matters being brought forward, and we're only now receiving and reviewing the information provided by staff this afternoon. The authority has adopted regulations under Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act, which requires the permission of the authority for development within an area regulated by the authority in order to ensure no adverse effect on the control of flooding, erosion, dynamic beaches, or pollution or conservation of land, or to permit alteration to a shoreline or watercourse or interference with a wetland. The staff has reviewed this proposed work, and a copy of the staff report has been given to the applicant. The Conservation Authorities Act, Section 2812 provides that permission required under a regulation made under clause 1B or 8 shall not be refused or granted subject to conditions unless the person requesting permission has been given the opportunity to require a hearing before the authority, or if the authority so directs, before authority's executive committee. In holding these hearings, the authority board is to determine whether or not a permit is to be issued. In doing so, we can only consider the application of the form that is before us, that staff report such evidence as may be given, and the submissions to be made on behalf of each applicant. The proceedings will be conducted accordingly to the Statutory Powers Procedure Act under Section 5 of the Canada Evidence Act. The witness may refuse to answer any questions on the ground the answer may tend to criminate that person or may tend to establish his or her liability, a civil proceeding at the instance of the Crown or of any person. The procedure in general shall be informal. However, this is a quasi-judicial process and provides for evidence to be given in response to members' questions. Therefore, staff and applicants will be asked to swear on an oath or provide an affirmation to speak the truth. In accordance with Section 28 of the Act, an applicant who has been refused permission or who objects to conditions imposed on permission may, within 30 days of receiving the reasons, appeal in writing to the minister, who may refuse the permission or grant permission with or without conditions. Through order in council, the responsibility for hearing the appeal has been transferred to the Mining and Lands Tribunal. If the applicant has any questions to ask of the hearing board or of the authority representative, they must be directed to the chair of the board. Staff will first introduce the applicant or his or her owner and others wishing to speak, and then present the staff position. The applicant and or their agent may then speak and may make any comments on the staff position if they so desire. I would also remind everyone that the hearing board is open to the public and therefore will allow others to speak if necessary. The applicant in rebuttal, we as the hearing board will question if necessary both the staff and the applicant or agent. So I do see Ms. Chapman is here. So before I ask Dan Jenner, our regulations coordinator, to introduce the applicants, I also see Ashley. I would ask that, Ashley, will you be speaking tonight to this, or is Jan not present? Oh,
No, Dan's here.
I don't see. Okay. So Dan will be speaking. I'll introduce. I do not see him.
I am here, Madam Chair.
Oh, well, welcome. Oh, there you are. Sorry, Dan. I would ask that, would you like to provide an affirmation or speak truth of the oath?
Affirmation, please.
Okay. Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence which you are about to give in these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you?
I do.
Thank you. Do any of the applicants, do you believe, are speaking tonight? Because I would have to ask them to either take the oath or affirmation as well.
I do not believe that they'll be speaking. I've spoken with both of them prior to the meeting. I think it would be appropriate to swear them in if they do have anything to add after my presentation.
Okay, fantastic. Go ahead, Mr. Jenner.
Thank you, everyone, and Madam Chair, for taking the time tonight to hear these two applications. Both of them are seeking relief from the access, ingress, and egress policy requirements. The first application before us, or before the hearing board this evening, is 8830 Riverside Drive within the city of Windsor. Ms. Marlene Chapman has made an application to construct an addition in the form of a fairly extensive sunroom on the lake side or riverside of the existing residential structure. The reasoning for needing to satisfy the current development requirements is the fact that the addition is going closer to the hazard, closer to the river than the existing structure. So we will need to be satisfying the setback requirements from the hazard, the floodproofing requirements, as well as the ingress and egress policy requirements. We have worked with Ms. Chapman to satisfy the setback requirements as well as the floodproofing requirements. Staff has attended the site and confirmed that those requirements are satisfied. The ERCA floodproofing elevation for this particular stretch of shoreline is 176.400 meters above sea level, and that is including our board-approved freeboard. The minimum ERCA road elevation is 175.8 meters above sea level, and the provincial minimum road elevation slightly lower than that. Next slide, please. As you can see on the map, there are portions of the road that are below the ERCA typical road elevations to the tune of approximately 1 foot. However, we are only approximately 4 inches below the typical provincial road elevations, and that is just for a few isolated sections of Riverside Drive. Riverside Drive is fully delineated. It is a fully developed area. Emergency first responders within the city of Windsor are well aware of the low-lying nature of this area and have updated emergency response plans to reflect that. And as I stated earlier, we are meeting and satisfying all of the regulatory requirements. So this is, again, a sunroom being constructed on the lakeside of an existing residential structure. With that, staff are recommending that the hearing board waive the ingress and egress access policy requirements so that Marlene can construct the addition at 8830 Riverside Drive in the city of Windsor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jenner. So on the application before us, there's a recommendation that Marlene Chapman's request relief from ingress egress policy requirements to construct an addition to the existing dwelling at 8830 Riverside Drive, City of Windsor be approved.
I'll move that recommendation, Madam Chair.
Moved by Councillor Courtney, seconded by Councillor Sleeman. Anybody opposed? That is carried. We do have another application, Russell Urbanowski. Go ahead, Mr. Jenner, with your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second application before the hearing board tonight is also for the construction of multiple additions and renovations, extensive renovations to an existing residential structure. The structure is located within the town of Tecumseh at 166 Cove Drive, near Brighton and Riverside Drive, also located on the Pike Creek. The application made by Mr. Urbanski is for multiple additions, including a garage addition and a covered porch. And we are seeking relief from the access, ingress, and egress policy requirements. Mr. Urbanski's architect and engineer has provided information to staff that satisfies the minimum setback requirements from the hazard, as well as the minimum floodproofing elevations. In fact, we are well in excess of our normal and standard floodproofing elevations. We are, again, dealing with our ingress and egress policy issue. The floodproofing elevation for this structure typically would be 176.7 meters above sea level, including the ERCA board-approved freeboard component. The minimum road elevation for ERCA is 176.100 meters above sea level. The provincial minimum road elevation slightly lower than that. The development itself, the structure itself, is located within an area that is relatively high in comparison to the surrounding areas. So Cove Drive itself is above the ERCA road elevations, with only a small section of Brighton Road and the corner of Riverside Drive where we are below the provincial typical road elevations by about 3 inches. Other areas are about 1 foot, about 10 inches below the ERCA road elevations. As the committee is aware, the town of Tecumseh has undertaken works along Riverside Drive to increase the flood protection of Riverside Drive. They have updated their emergency response plans as well as purchased equipment and undertaken mapping exercises to assist with emergency response in these areas. Again, this is additions to an existing residential structure, along with some interior renovations, and we are satisfying all of the regulatory standards. With that, staff is recommending that the committee approve this application and their request for relief from the access, ingress, and egress policy requirements. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Jenner. So on the application from Russell Urbanowski to request relief from access, ingress, egress policy requirements to construct additions, undertake renovations to the dwelling at 166 Cove Drive in Tecumseh be approved. I need a mover. Moved by Sue Desjardins, seconded by Morley Bowman. Anybody opposed? That is carried. We now need to move from the hearing board and reconvene as the ERCA board members. May I have a mover for that? Councillor Sleeman and Councillor Janice. Anybody opposed? That is carried. That the minutes of the September 9th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Directors and the recommendations therein be approved as distributed. Moved by Deputy Mayor Verbeek, seconded by Dame Alec. Anybody opposed? That is carried. That the minutes of the October 27, 2021 meeting of the Executive Committee and the recommendations therein be approved as distributed. Moved by Deputy Mayor Bailey, seconded by Kieran McKenzie. Anybody opposed? That is carried. That the minutes of the September 13th, 2021 meeting of the John R. Park Homestead Advisory Board and the recommendations therein be approved as distributed. Moved by Chris Vanderdolen, seconded by Jim Morrison. Anybody opposed? That is carried. That the minutes of the June 21st, 2021 and September 27th, 2020 meetings of the Conservation Ontario be received. moved by Morley Bowman, seconded by Councillor Sleeman. Anybody opposed? No, that is carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes, from any of the minutes? We're hearing none. Do some have announcements? Good evening and welcome to everyone tuning in from home tonight. There have been many projects that have taken place since our September meeting. Last night, we were pleased to host the virtual public information center for the Little River Floodplain to provide an opportunity for stakeholders to review the plan and provide feedback. The expansive dike rehabilitation project at Hillman Marsh Conservation Area, funded by Ducks Unlimited Canada, got underway last week and expected to be completed in mid-December. In October, the province of Ontario released the regulations associated with the changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. Phase 1 of the transition plan requires conservation authorities to develop a written transition plan with timelines. Administration is currently working on this plan, which will be presented to the board in December. The first step of this plan is an update to ERCA's administrative bylaws, and a report will be presented later this evening. By February 28, 2022, a full inventory of programs categorized as mandatory and non-mandatory programs, the historical cost and the sources of funding for each program service is required. Some of this work to identify mandatory and non-mandatory programs and services has been initially identified in the board-approved 2021 budget. As regulations are now enacted, further refinements to this model now being adopted and will be included in the 2022 draft budget. Over the past few months, we have also welcomed many volunteers to tree planting and cleanup events across the region. Guests were eager and excited to again take action for the environment through these community outreach projects. I do have to acknowledge Danielle's commitment and extensive time that she puts into all of these events. Thank you, Danielle, and your team. Finally, I'd like to extend my appreciation to the Essex Region Conservation Foundation and all of their participants and volunteers for the September's bike tour. Despite the rainy start to that day, it was an excellent event which raised over $22,000. Once again, a big thank you to all of those involved. We do not have any delegations this evening. We do have a presentation. Dan Levidick, ERCA's ecologist, biologist, along with Tom Dufour, GIS technician, and Kevin Money will be updating us this evening on the Point Pelee National Park Ecological Connectivity and Restoration Project undertaken this year.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may, just a couple very brief introductory comments.
Certainly.
The presentation that you're about, they will be brief, Madam Chair. The presentation you're about to see highlight the work that we historically have done and are continuing to do with partners, with the federal government, with the provincial government. And on first blush, it's going to seem that it's all natural heritage. It's ecosystemic. You cannot separate life science features from flood and erosion. You cannot separate trees and wetlands from how they mitigate, flood events. This whole area that we are looking at working with Point Pelee National Park on is an area of the region that receives runoff from Hillman, Levo, and other tributary drains out through to Lake Erie. Life science work is a component of what we do to protect lives and property within the region. So it's important work. However, moving forward, unfortunately, much of it will be labeled as non-mandatory. But most of this work with this presentation, though, is paid for through grants and through grant applications and through monies provided through the federal government. So it may be non-mandatory, but if given the opportunity, we will continue to do this very important work should the board see favor to approve those activities. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you so much, Mr. Burney, for the introduction and the comments. Those are appreciated. I'm just seeing, would we be beginning with Dan?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair.
Fantastic. Thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, board members. I'd like to thank you again for allowing me to present on the results of a study that we've completed with Parks Canada, Point Pelee National Park, called the Ecological Connectivity Restoration Project. This particular project took a look at 3 different watersheds outside of Point Pelee National Park, the Hillman Lebo Creek watersheds, the Sturgeon Creek watersheds, and the Southeast Leamington drainage schemes, and the natural features that are in those areas north of Point Pelee National Park. You can see on the right-hand photograph also the properties that ERCA owns in dark green and the properties that Point Pelee or Parks Canada owns in orange. This particular study utilized the expertise of various disciplines, including biologists, climate change specialists, and geomatics technicians. And it really was something that is on the forefront of pulling together research from various disciplines in order to come up with some very logical recommendations for restoration. This really is essentially a refinement of the restoration opportunities mapping that was originally prescribed in the Essex Region Natural Heritage System Strategy that was completed by ERCA in 2013. What the ERNS basically recommended was wetland buffers, riparian or stream buffers, and other restoration opportunities such as linkage or reforestation, but not only just the general reforestation or restoration areas around the region that should be restored, but also the priority of those restoration opportunities. And that would have been based upon general criteria on whether or not these restoration opportunities were on some really good Carolinian sandy loamy soils, on publicly owned lands within floodplains or high priority areas identified by Nature Conservancy of Canada. And it really didn't prescribe what type of restoration should take place, just whether or not this restoration would be a good idea based upon a number of just general high-level ecological principles. So what we're able to do with this current project was able to take into consideration and gather together numerous data sets and consider those in figuring out exactly what we should restore, not just necessarily where we should restore it in the landscape. And what we did is we updated last year the ELC, or Ecological Land Classification Vegetation Community Mapping, which is really just mapping of various vegetation communities in the landscape and the restoration opportunities that go with them once that is completed. We also took into consideration a data set that we obtained from the province of Ontario, the Natural Heritage Information Centre, or NHIC is actually the body at the province through the ministry, collaboration with the Ministry of Natural Resources, that tracks rare species in Ontario. And so they gave us all of the records of all of our rare species in the region. We cross-referenced those with another publication that came out of the NHIC, which is the Climate Change Vulnerable Species document. And they surmised which of the species in Ontario they may be vulnerable to some climate change impacts, and therefore we should plan for some adaptation. Also, the NHIC is the one that tracks and basically prescribes the rarity status of all the species in Ontario as well. So we have that information along with those species lists. So what essentially this does is, once we have that list, we identify the species that were in our study area. And you can see there's a variety of species from plants to birds, mammals, reptiles, and insects. And we were able to do the research to basically categorize them into their general habitat types, their preferences. So you can see the forest woodland species includes things such as American chestnut and blue ash and flowering dogwood, whereas swamp species might be something like Pathonotary warbler. And so we were able to very generally figure out through research collaboration through Point Pelee and ourselves the different habitat types of these various species we're interested in the region that we're working in. So what this methodology does is, number one, as you can see there, it identifies the various classifications of vegetation that we have in our landscape, from forests to meadows to swamps and marshes. And then we take in the image number 2, the NHIC EO, and EO stands for element occurrence. You can just say that that's the population of the rare species that the NHIC says is living in that area. And in this particular case, you can see that that EO dotted circle goes across the landscape, and we know that that particular species was a swamp species, for example. And so what we're able to do in number 3 is highlight the habitat of that preferred EO and say that's most likely where it actually lives in the landscape. And then number 4, we're actually to take our tool and work out from GIS and say if we wanted to build more habitat for that particular species, we'd want some swamp habitat created very close to the existing swamp. And so we're building upon the habitat that's occupied by the species outwards, increasing its habitat availability. So in this particular case, as you can see some examples in the for the meadow thicket species, we had about 9 different species varying from plants to reptiles and insects. And what those dotted lines do is highlight the little meadow fragments that we've identified in the landscape occupied by those rare species that we're tracking. Here's another particular vegetation type, Carolinian forest or woodland species, and the highlighted habitat for those particular species, habitat types for those particular species we're interested in. Again, marsh, highlighted up there, and swamp. So what we're actually doing is correlating the habitat in the landscape that we've mapped with the actual species that need our help. And so what this tool actually does for us, and we use a GIS tool called, sorry. Euclidean allocation tool. And what it does is identifies the polygon of the habitat we're interested in and prescribes outwards restoration opportunities very close to that habitat type, the nearest neighbor. And in this particular case, we have 4 different species. We have 2 meadow thicket species, and we have some species that are associated with forest and woodland. And you can see that species 1, 3, and 4 occupy the dark green solid habitat. And the stippled outside edge of that, where you see the restoration opportunity, is the habitat we're going to create for them. And species 2 is more of a meadow thicket species in orange, and you can see the orange stippled habitat that we're creating for it. So in this particular case, the forest species were probably something like American chestnut and flowering dogwood, and the meadow species might have been something like prairie rose, for example. Here's another example down in the southeast corner of Hillman Marsh Conservation Area, lands that we own. 2 different species that we're interested in here. One is a marsh species in blue, species 1, and one is a swamp species in green, which is species 2. And you can see what the tool actually did for us and prescribed that when we're trying to prescribe for restoration in the landscape on a particular parcel, we should view it from the perspective of these are the particular species we should take into consideration. And then you can see the swamp and the marsh type restoration habitats. This tool is actually telling us that's probably the best idea in that landscape to deal with those particular species. So we're not only dealing with generalist species, again, we're dealing with species that need our help, those species that are species at risk, that we're trying to recover their populations to a sustainable level, or those species that might be vulnerable to climate change. And therefore, a climate adaptation strategy would be, let's create more habitat for those because they need our help. And also this project also allows us to sum up the percentage figures of the amount of acreage of the habitat there is existing in the landscape of the different types and of the restoration opportunities that we're actually prescribing in the landscape for those habitat types. And you can see that we have the existing habitat, the restoration, and we added up this example for the Hillman and Lebo Creek watersheds going from I believe it was the 13% up to the 22% if we were to do all the restoration opportunities. So that's really all I have in the presentation, and all I really wanted to sum up very generally is that this allows us to really be fine-tuning and honing in on restoration projects that help the species that need the help the most. Instead of just saying, if we plant it, they will come, we're actually doing something specifically for the species that require most help in adapting to climate change and or recovering their populations because of species at risk issues. And that allows us to do the best job possible in any restoration program we implement in the landscape. This is really on the cutting edge. I don't believe anybody else in the province of Ontario has pulled these data sets together in this particular type of example of prescribing for restoration. And we are taking this particular pilot project that we did with Point Pelee National Park, and we've presented it to the Detroit River Canadian Cleanup Habitat Working Group. and basically purported to them that we can help with the delisting of that area of concern, especially the loss of fish and wildlife habitat, degradation of wildlife populations, beneficial use impairments, by prescribing exactly what habitat types in the AOC to restore for those species that need help, and therefore get closer to delisting that as an area of concern. And we'd like to expand outwards and complete this for the entire region sometime in the future. That allows us to make sure that we're not only doing as much as we can, but we're doing specifically what we need to be doing. And I'd happy to be entertaining any questions from anybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Councillor Janice?
Thank you, Chair. Dan, I was just, when was it 2013 that you said a report was done, maybe not as in depth, or you're just updating the 2013 report?
Yes, the 2013 report was actually even a modification or an upgrade to an original report we did in 2002. It was called the Biodiversity Conservation Strategy. And it took some general guidelines from the province and the federal government and said, if you were to restore habitat, this is how much you should restore in your landscape, and this is where you should do it, based on some general principles of buffering some streams, linking up some woodlots, and buffering some wetlands. And so the 2013 Essex Region Natural Heritage System Strategy took that original report and even upgraded it to say, this is where we're prioritizing as well, based upon some general landscape principles. What this project does is even add more detail to that restoration opportunity layering and saying, which specific species are we looking to restore for?
With that being said, so from 2013 and 2002, have we lost some species? Have you identified that there's any that have been lost or are really major in danger?
We do know that our natural environments change over time. They're very, very dynamic. They can change due to climate change impacts or just natural succession. We don't have a close enough monitoring program across the province to give any specific examples on species that we know are declining. That's what the CSIRO and CSIWIC are in charge of. Those are committees of the province and the federal government who look at when a species is listed as endangered or threatened, or even the NHIC, when they list things as provincially rare. They're taking into consideration some general monitoring across the province, but specifically, we don't have enough detail to determine in the Essex region which species are declining or which ones are increasing. There's not that level of monitoring going on. But we take the advice from the NHIC in that when we spot this particular species that might be an S1 provincially rare plant species, they have the data to say that across the province, that's something to be concerned of in our region to try and increase its population.
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Okay. And so thank you, Dan, for your presentation. We now need to move and receive this for members' information. Can I have a mover? Larry Patterson, and seconded by Councillor Lusher. Anybody opposed? That is carried. Thank you again, Dan.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We have some reports for approval. ED 2621 tender for Microsoft Office 365 migration. Ryan Rossman will be speaking to the results of an RFQ as outlined in our first report for this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Welcome.
And thank you for permitting the opportunity to provide an update and information regarding our recent tender, which was for the aforementioned Microsoft Office 365 and cloud services. Excuse me, the tender closed approximately a week ago, just over a week ago. It was sent out to 4 vendors, 3 within the Essex and Windsor region, and 1 who provides, well, quite frankly, cross Canada and provincial services to several government agencies. Of the respondents, or the people that were provided for response, 2 vendors declined One vendor did not submit and one vendor did respond to tender. The vendor that did respond to tender was a group called Tenant Computer Group, located in Markham, Ontario. And they represent a fairly large interest in government services, providing services like this to several boards and agencies and commissions across the province. The tender came, the response came back slightly higher than I had initially expected, but well within norm, at a total of 29,900 as the estimated total for full conversion of services previously mentioned, to bring forth services to reduce both our technical risk and our technical debt at ERCA. It is our intention that we move forward with the proposal and that we begin to close off those gaps in our technology footprint.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Are there any questions or comments for Ryan this evening? Okay, we are seeing none. So the contract for the scope of the work relating to the migration of on-premises directory AD and ADFS Azure integration, file services, print services, and security offerings to an Office 365 hosted set of solutions be awarded to Tenant Commuter Group in the amount of $29,900, and further that the office equipment and networks reserve fund be utilized to fund this contract. I need a mover. Moved by Deputy Mayor Bailey, seconded by Sue Desjardins. Anybody opposed? That is carried.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, and thank you for your report, Ryan. Thank you. I'd just like to acknowledge that Councillor Mark Carrick has joined us. Welcome, Councillor. Good evening. Alrighty, I just lost a little bit of a note here. We now have the Turkey Creek hydrologic and hydraulic modeling update. Tian Martin, ERCA's water resources engineer, will respond to any questions on this report. Welcome, Tian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I could provide, through you, Chair, provide a small update to the hydrologic and hydraulic modeling. So since the last board meeting, phase 1 of the project has been completed. We have received the final report the end of October. As of now, we are looking to proceed with phase 2 and with the consent of the board, proceed with entering into professional services agreements with Dillon and Landmark Engineers. Once we receive a confirmation that all stakeholders agree to the new proposal.
Okay, thank you, Tian. Does anybody have any questions for Tian this evening? Or any comments? Councillor Desjardins?
Thank you. Through you to Tian. You indicated that phase 1 has just been completed. Do we have any idea how long it might take to get phase 2 done? If we could get a follow-up report so that we know things are moving forward, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Chair. Currently, we are expecting that we would be able to receive preliminary results for phase 2 early next year. These results would inform other studies that have currently been put on hold, and they may resume. Through the NDMP funding, the report and the whole project was to be completed by the end of March. As of now, as we move forward with phase 2, we can say we most likely will be able to receive some preliminary results in the early next year.
So is getting it done by March doable?
As of now, I believe so. We haven't fully started phase 2 just yet. So once we enter into professional services agreements and begin phase 2, we'll get a better understanding.
Okay, that would be good. And if you could just keep us updated, we'd appreciate it. Thanks, Tian.
Thanks.
Oh, my apologies there. did lose connectivity here. Are we all present? Okay, we got technical difficulties here. Can everyone hear me again?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, fantastic.
We
I do
got you.
apologize for that. Okay, Tian, thank you for your comments and for your presentation. The professional services and agreements with Dillon Consulting Limited and Landmark Engineers Inc. for Phase 2 of the Turkey Creek hydrologic and hydraulic modeling update. Upon confirmation that all partner municipalities are in agreement with the proposal. I need a mover on this recommendation. Councillor Carrick, and seconded by Councillor Bowman. Anybody opposed? And that is carried. Amendments to the ERCA administrative bylaws. Tim Burney will provide an update on this report and answer any questions for the members.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had to switch to my cell phone. I don't know what took place here, so can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Something happened with mine as well, but yes, go ahead, Tim.
All right. There was an update to the administrative bylaws triggered by the transitional plan. There was a Conservation Ontario guideline to, go through and frame out all those changes, many of those changes. Some are minor in nature. Others are going to require some additional administrative activities. The changes are highlighted in the administrative bylaw package that's been provided to the board. A bit of a significant thing, we were one of the first authorities that, implemented, switching and having a mandatory shift in the chair position. And so, there's a slight change to what has to take place, and it's outlined in the administrative bylaws, but basically, a sitting chair, if they are newly appointed as chair, they can run for an additional term. We have to have annual reappointment or annual election. At that point in time, the second year, let's say if chair is reappointed and vice chair is reappointed, we would have to have a switch occur to another municipality. Now, the general process that we followed, we could still comply with at that point in time if it's the desire of the board. But every year, there has to be an election or reappointment. And the existing chair, who's only served one term, could be reappointed for the second year. But after the second year, has to be replaced by a chair from another municipality. And I'm suggesting at that point in time we can continue with the alteration as we've historically been doing for over 20 years here at this authority. And then the rest of the administrative bylaw again complies with the Conservation Ontario guideline, and the changes are put forward and shown in the package in front of the board, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Burney. Any questions or comments, board members? Okay, well, I am seeing none. So now the Essex Region Conservation Authority, we need to approve the amendments to the administrative bylaws that reflect February 2nd, 2021 proclamation of governance related clauses in the Conservation Authorities Act and Schedule 6 of Bill 229 to protect, support, and recover from COVID-19. Oh, am I on the wrong one? No, that's right. And
No,
for
you're correct,
that,
Madam.
yep, and for that, pursuant to Section 3 and subsection 49 of Municipal Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy, the Board of Directors, as designated as head under MFI PPA, delegates all the powers and duties granted and vested in the head of the position of Chief Administrative Officer. Need a mover here. Deputy Mayor Becchetti, seconded by Kieran McKenzie. Anybody opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Mr. Burney. Reports for information, ERCA Board of Directors 2022 meeting schedule. Tim will be able to answer any questions regarding this report. Sue, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, I think the annual general meeting should be January 20th, not the 21st. I think 21st is a Friday, unless we're changing it.
Let's just look at that as well.
Apologies, Madam Chair. The intention was that it would be held on the Friday, and that could be a typo.
So it will be the Friday, the 21st versus a Thursday evening.
Is it the wishes, Nicole? Is there a reason
Apologies.
for the 21st?
The proposal would have been for Thursday, the 20th, which is consistent with our Thursday night meetings.
Correct.
Right. Okay, so we just need to update that then. Thank you.
Okay, so then if we need to amend that in the report, it would be Thursday, the 20th. Thank you,
Okay.
Councilor Desjardins.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, the ERCA Board of Directors 2022 meeting schedule is outlined. Report to BD 2920 be approved. Moved by Councillor Gill and seconded by Peter Courtney. Anybody opposed? That is carried. Watershed Management Services. James can respond to any questions on the report for September and October 2021.
Madam Chair, I just want to indicate I am here. I have to keep my camera off. I'm having some connectivity issues on my end as well. So to save the bandwidth, I will leave the camera off, but I am here.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Bryant? Okay, we are seeing none. So we need a mover for the review of regulations of planning applications as presented in report BD 3021 be received for members' information. Moved by Councillor Vanderdolen, seconded by Councillor Malik. Anybody opposed? That is carried. Little River floodplain mapping. Again, James is present. Does anybody have any questions or comments to this report? Councillor McKenzie?
Thank you, Chair. Just, I know there's a lot of work that's been undertaken and we've been waiting for this to come for a while. I've certainly been getting some pressure on this. So I'm glad to see it come forward. Thank you for all the work that's been done on it. At this point, what is ERCA's involvement moving forward on this process? Are we done with the Conservation Authority and is it now essentially a City of Windsor process, or does the Conservation Authority still have work to do insofar as the floodplain mapping piece goes?
Thank you. And through Madam Chair, yeah, we're still quite ingrained in the process at the moment. So our next steps are really to review any of the comments that have come in, both through the virtual PIC that was held, as well as any other comments that may come in via email. We do have the actual updated mapping available virtually on a website where people can log in and take a look and see what it might mean specifically to their property. So we want to give people a little bit of time to take a look at that. I will also, stress that, there's not much we can do in terms of changing the physics that are going on here, the hydrologic modeling and hydraulic modeling. It's pretty well set in stone. It's been peer reviewed. So right now we're looking to just ensure that, people are aware of what it means to them. Next steps beyond that would be to finalize a report. We would bring the full floodplain mapping report to the board for approval for use going forward for, flood proofing, et cetera, through our Section 28 program within the authority here. So you will be receiving a more comprehensive update to this board, and we'll continue to work with the city staff through the Sandwich South Master Servicing Study, because the existing conditions will inform how we move forward with the development in the upper reaches of the lands, which is the Sandwich South lands.
Okay, and I want to be careful the way, well, I'll just, the $1 million question is what's the timeline there? I don't, so I'd just say I'm not looking for the most aggressive timeline? What is the actual timeline for to proceed to the next to that?
If I may, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. And sorry, James, excuse me. Mr. Vice Chair, this action, this technical analysis, this technical study is just that. It refines and defines for us our regulatory extents within those areas. Once we get through the approval process with it and what have you, and we're talking, we're talking a couple of months or less to finalize that. That mapping, the identification of that mapping, then has to move by the city through its channels in the planning process. Those channels in the planning process include that EA process the city's already engaged in, and then the mapping in itself refine the extents, define the floodway, and then following the implementation through the planning process, we then get going on some development reviews with your staff.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bernie. Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, so on report BD 3121 be received for members' information. Moved by Councillor Bowman, seconded by Councillor Sleeman. Anybody opposed? And that is carried. We have a couple of reports, Environment Registry report. Conservation Ontario comments on a minister's order for temporary suspension of protection upon the listing of black ash under the Endangered Species Act and amendments to Ontario Regulation, General Regulation, Endangered Species Act. That Conservation Ontario comments minister's order for the temporary suspension of protection upon the listing of black ash under the Endangered Species Act be received for information. Any questions or comments on this report? We can move that then, please. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Carrick. Anybody opposed? That is carried. We have two pieces of correspondence, letter from Conservation Ontario to the Honourable David Piccini, MECP, regarding Conservation Ontario's Governance, Accountability and Transparency Initiative dated September 24th of 21. An email from Kristen Corrigal, MECP, regarding regulations under the Conservation Authorities Act dated October 7th of 21. And we need this correspondence received for members' information. Moved by Deputy Mayor Verbeek, seconded by Councillor Lucier. Anybody opposed? This evening's meeting, the board was convened in camera to discuss confidential matters related to property. I'll require someone to move a motion to endorse actions of the committee of whole. Moved by Councillor Desjardins, seconded by Councillor Gill. Anybody opposed? It is carried. Is there any other new business members wish to address at this time? Other business, the next meeting of the ERCA Board of Directors will be held on Thursday, December 9th, 2021, starting at 6 p.m. via Zoom web conferencing. I would like to remind board members that our regular meeting tonight is followed by a meeting of the Essex Region Source Protection Committee. Please do not leave when this meeting is adjourned, as we will be moving directly into that meeting. So just stay present. I actually do want to state something under a new business, other business. I would like for us to, you can expect maybe get some emails for some dates. I would like to see us as a board have some sort of holiday gathering. I'm going to throw around some dates, maybe out at the John R. Something casual, social distance, something. So just be prepared to have that out there. And I hope that we can maybe just come together finally. It's been some time, so I'll keep a lookout for that. So under this meeting, we will adjourn. However, stay present and we'll reconvene into the SAP. So I need a mover to adjourn. Councillor Andrew Dolan, seconded by Councillor Morrison. Anybody opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Oh, you're all frozen. Oh, there we are. Must be windy out there. Is it raining? Is there a storm? Is something coming? I can't look out yet.
Something's
thank you.
going on.
Something. Well, thank you,
Nice and
board
sunny.
members.
Nice and sunny here in Cottam.
Just the 11th concession.
Probably. Okay. Well, I am going to take a moment here because now we're going to meet as the Source Protection Authority. I'm going to take a moment to confirm that there have been no changes to our attendance from the ERCA board as we move to convene on the RS. Thank you and welcome again. Please raise your hand to indicate if there are any members who need to declare conflict of interest. Okay. We can proceed with this evening's agenda for the Essex Region Source Protection Meeting. I need an approval to 2020 moved by.
Madam Chair, you're having some
I was
issues
cutting
with
out.
your internet. Yeah.
Yes, well, the meeting has adjourned. Just kidding. Joke. Okay, how is that better? In the event, Karen, if I do completely go out for some time, I would just ask that you would take over for sure. So we just need a mover to approve tonight's. Yes.
I might suggest that you turn your camera off, just perhaps for a bit to see if that resolves some of the issue.
Okay, no problem. Okay, just need a mover then for this evening's agenda approval. Moved by Councillor Lucier, seconded by Deputy Mayor Verbeek. Anybody opposed? That is carried. Minutes for approval, that the minutes of the meeting of the Essex Region Source Protection Authority held on Thursday, April the 8th of 21, and the recommendations therein be adopted and distributed. I need that moved. Councillor Janice, seconded by Councillor Bowman. Anybody opposed? That is carried. That the minutes of the meetings of the Source Protection Committee held on March 10th of 2021 and the recommendations therein be received as distributed. Moved by Councillor Desjarlais, seconded by Councillor Malik. Anybody opposed? That is carried. We don't have any delegations, but we do have some reports for approval. Risk Management Official Inspector Designation. Katie Stamler is present and she will be available for any questions related to the report and to introduce Kathleen Schneckenberger to the board. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the report before you today is to appoint Kathleen Schneckenberger as our new risk management official and inspector. Kathleen completed her training and certification as risk management official in October. And as you know, we provide those risk management services for all of the municipalities in the region. And this will add an additional person for us to be able to do those duties. So we'll have, I believe we'll have 4 people available to do risk management services if we need to have that crossover.
Fantastic. Thank you, Katie. And welcome, Kathleen. Welcome to the team.
Thank you very much, Chair.
We know you will do a fantastic job.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
So in this report, Kathleen Schneckenberger be appointed as Risk Management Official and Risk Management Inspector under subsection 48-2 of the Clean Water Act. And further that, a certificate of appointment as Risk Management Official and Risk Management Inspector be issued to Kathleen Schneckenberger by the ERCA Chair as Chair of the SPA under subsection 48.3 of the Clean Water Act. And further that, a separate certificate of designation as Provincial Offense Officer under the Provincial Offences Act for the purpose of enforcing Part 4 of the Clean Water Act 2006 be issued to Kathleen Schneckenberger by the ERCA Chair as Chair of the SPA. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Verbeek, Deputy Mayor Verbeek, my apologies. Anybody opposed? That is carried. Committee of the Whole. Earlier this evening, the Source Protection Committee convened on an in-camera session regarding a personnel-related matter for the Source Protection Committee membership. It requires someone to move a motion to endorse those actions of the Committee of the Whole. Moved by Laura Lucier, seconded by Councillor Gill. Anybody opposed? That is carried. We do not have any additional correspondence. Is there any new business members wish to raise? Okay, I am seeing none. Well, we are now looking for an adjournment that this evening's November 18th, 2021 meeting of the Essex Region Source Protection Authority Board of Directors be adjourned. Moved by Peter Courtney, seconded by Larry Patterson. Anybody opposed? No, that is carried. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance this evening. Hope you're all keeping well. And this concludes our meeting. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you, board.